We can break intellectual gifts into many categories. For convenience, let me try 4. There is, first of all, part of our faculty we call imagination, the ability to picture concrete, pictorially and vividly, reality and the possibilities and variations. Joseph Smith had a vivid ability to picture and an emotional response. Some would say a dramatic propensity. And yet, he counseled that we should avoid, as he put it, a fancy and flowery and heated imagination. He had the gift, but he did not abuse it. And then there is the ability to conceptualize. That is to say, to understand principle, information, truth, and then, which isn't quite the same, to express it accurately, clearly, and if need be, briefly. Joseph Smith, whatever his early tendencies, and however he may or may not have shown up in school, had a brilliant conceptual ability, both to see and understand, go to the heart of an issue, and then to express it so that others would hear and understand. Related to that was the charge, in effect, that he wrote down while he was for many months in isolation in Liberty. He wrote a letter, you recall, parts of which belong in our Doctrine and Covenants, but part that is not included is equally profound. He says, "The things of God are of deep import, and time and experience and careful and ponderous and solemn thoughts can only find them out. Thy mind, O man, if thou wilt lead a soul unto salvation, must stretch as high as the utmost heaven, and search into and contemplate the darkest abyss. Thou must commune with God." That remarkable passage is in the context of his saying that too often, even in our most important council meetings, classes, and gatherings, we had been too light-minded, too careless, too trivial, and too often unconcentrated in our direction. The third faculty, if it's an appropriate way to call it, is memory. The ability to retain what one learns and summon it for further use, implication, or application at will. The evidence that he had to learn by repetition, just as we do, is initially in the fact that Moroni comes and repeats how many times? The exact message, including the quotation of scriptures, which the prophet heard often enough and clearly enough to recognize were slightly different than in the King James Version of the Bible. At least 4 times he has to hear the message. Many might suppose that one visit from such a heavenly visitor would be sufficient for us to remember everything. On the contrary, the difficulty would be immense of being able to concentrate. Sometimes there is an initial expression of fear, the scriptures record. Withdrawal, the difficulty of getting oneself off one's hands long enough to listen. He listened, he remembered. The evidence of his remarkable memory is at the other end of his life when he sits down with William Clayton, his brother Hiram, 1 or 2 others, and dictates the revelation we now call section 132. It is a long revelation. The verses in it are long. And some of them sound as they describe the conditions of the everlasting covenant, like an attorney had spent weeks carving out every possible synonym and nuance so that no loophole would remain. One example: all covenants, contracts, bonds, obligations, oaths, vows, associations, performances, or expectations. That's the subject of the sentence. Then there's a verb, and then a very long predicate. Just to have written that after patient winnowing of the dictionary would be an achievement. He dictated it straight, and according to one witness, without a change. Now that's amazing enough. But then someone suggested that a copy be made prior to Hiram doing what he had there expressed the wish to do. He wanted to take a copy of it himself. "No," said the prophet, "no copy is necessary. I can sit down and redictate it anytime." Now that is staggering. He had the essential, I take it, the essential core of that revelation so clearly in mind, he had full confidence he could restate it. He may have meant that he could have dictated exactly the same way. If so, then he was indeed beyond all mortal ability. But I think he meant only that the content was clear to him and that it would not be lost if the written version were lost. That is a remarkable memory. Then finally, one can raise questions about anyone's intellectual capacity in terms of the ability to be simplicity-minded, and that's a gift. It didn't say simple-minded. Simplicity-minded, able to reduce elaborate ideas to a core center or essence. But at the same time, it is a gift to be able to see what ordinaries do not. That is, to recognize implications, nuances, extensions of ideas that go beyond ordinary perception. Here again, Joseph Smith was an original. For on the one hand, he went in administrative and decision-making enterprises quickly to the heart with ingenuity and skill. But at the other end, if required and asked to elaborate on a given doctrine or teaching, he could do so and stretch the minds of all present.